Hello and welcome back. We've got a great double exposure image. We've got some horses, and we're going to be using our layer masks and the gradient tool to kind of fade our exposures in together. Starting off here in Photoshop, we're in Chapter 2, Section 2, Horses. Let's go ahead and open up both of these images. I just want to get like a variety of examples here. There are a lot of great examples, out there, with double exposures with people, but you can do this with just about anything. Kind of the themes, when I'm looking to create a double exposure, I generally want my exposures to say something about each other. So my idea here was this is we have one horse and he's dreaming of all of his other horse buddies or something like that. So you can obviously make up any of your own themes, but the fact that these images go together, in my opinion, creates a strong double exposure. So we're going to use our move tool here. Let's hold shift and click and drag from one image to another. There we go, and we'll go ahead and close that one down. Now, again, let's go ahead and talk about what we're looking for, and we already talked about this a little bit in Chapter 1, but when we're creating our double exposure, it's all about contrast. So my background image, you can see we have a light colored background and a dark colored horse. Okay? Now, in this image, we have a relatively dark colored foreground and a light colored sky. So that contrast allows us to work with our double exposures. Okay, without that contrast and without like sharp definition of shape, you can still create a double exposure, but it's not going to be very clear what the double exposure is. Let's start off with, we're going to create a black and white adjustment layer, and we are going to leave this one in black and white. And then this layer, we're going to change from normal to lighten. So what happens in the lighten blend mode, as you can see here, is we are now lightening up, there we go, we're lightening up the horse. Okay, so you can see down here, there we go, down here you can see the other horses pretty clearly. Okay, you can still see the highlight from the horse because the foreground image is not lighter. Now what's happening is my background image is just kind of like blending in, especially around the sky. Okay, and because this layer set to lighten, okay, is the sky is really light here, basically it's just hiding the rest of the horse because it's lightening it up. So we're going to use a layer mask to get that visible. Before we do that, let's change our layer back to normal. We're going to right click and convert this to a smart object. Okay, and let's change it back to lighten again. When you create a smart object, you want your blending mode to be in normal. Okay, the reason there is if you want to change that blending mode, you'd have to actually go into your smart object, change the blending mode in your smart object, save it out and close it, and then go back in here. So it's just better to have a layer be on normal and then turn it into a smart object. It's a smart object, let's put it back into lighten. Now we're going to use our levels, so let's hit Control or Command L for our levels. And I'm just going to make my darks just a little bit darker here. There we go. The light, it was just a little bit on the light side, and it just blends with our image. See, if we go darker, 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 you can see the effect there. Okay, so we're just going to take our kind of our midline, just go a little bit darker. Hit OK there. I'm also going to hit Control or Command T because I want a little bit more of this in the seam. So we made it a smart object. Okay, there we go. And now I want to see, how many of my horse brethren can I fit into this? Scene? There we go. And of course, because this is Photoshop, we have the ability to create our own, composition as well. So in this case, I'm enjoying this composition with the two horses there. We have this horse here, and then we want to keep an eye out for where we're putting this, because you can see if I just put this image right there, well, what we're going to get, let's just hit enter there, what we're going to get is a hard line here. So things you could do around that, you could clone stamp. Like if you really wanted it to be right there, you could take a clone stamp tool and just extend your image just a little bit, or you can just bring it down, right about there, and then everything blends together really well. Now in this case, this image, let's just hit Control or Command T so you can see the boundaries. This image does not completely cover the underlying image, right? You can see the ears stick out here, and then here on the bottom, okay, we have a hard line here. So what we're going to do is we have a hard line, but it's blending together pretty well. Like here, that blends together really well, and here, this is a relatively dark area with a dark area. So we're going to click on our layer mask, and I'm just going to paint black on my layer mask right here. Okay, that's just going to feather out that edge, and it's going to blend together a little bit better. And the reason it's blending together well is because we have dark and dark. Okay, now that looks pretty good. So that looks promising. I really like this image so far. However, I'm unable to see, the eye of the horse. Right? I don't want to just do that because that doesn't look natural. So we're working with a sky here. So what I want is to kind of fade the sky out as it goes up. So we're going to use our layer mask to do that, and we're just going to use the gradient tool. So let's hit G for the gradient tool, and you can see my gradient tool. Now we have our gradient editor, and I'm set to foreground to transparent. Okay, so what this means is, just bring it up here. So it's going to set to my foreground color, which is black, to transparent. Now if I just did this on a new layer, this is what it would look like. There we go. Let's just make sure our foreground color is black. On a new layer, it would look like this. Okay, black to transparent. There we go. Now on a layer mask, because black hides the layer, I can just simply click up here at the top, and then you can go in any direction you want. This time I want it to be straight up and down, so I'm going to hold the Shift key. And if you hold Shift, it restricts you to either horizontal, 45s, or straight up and down. So I'm starting just outside here, okay? Just outside here, which is going to be black, and then down to transparent, and I let go. And there we have our black to transparent. And you can do that again if you want like a little bit more of it to show up or anything like that. You can go back the other way. I use the gradient tool there to kind of like get a very nice smooth gradient. You don't have to use the gradient tool. You can definitely just, sometimes what I like to do is just create like a really large brush. So let's just create a really large brush, and then I'll just paint maybe black a little bit right over here too. There we go. Maybe white a little bit here. Here I'm kind of choosing where I'd like more or less information to be visible. There we go. Now with this, I like to use a relatively low flow of my brush. So a low flow, let's just create a new layer here and show you how this works. Using a low flow, let's just choose a nice color you will be able to see. So our opacity is at 100, our flow is at 10%. If I use a low flow, I can go over an area and it's just going to show up just like a little bit. But if I go over it, over and over again, and this is the same brush stroke by the way, it's just going to get more and more visible. So it's kind of like natural media a little bit more. Like if you had a marker and you went over an area more and more and more, it would kind of get darker. That's how flow works. So one thing I do want to take in mind with this double exposure is it looks really good. What we do have is we can see the sky is kind of coming over here on the outside of the horse, and over here on the outside of the horse in that area as well. So you have the option. You can have that be visible. If you don't want it to be visible, there's a couple things you can do. What I would do is make this layer invisible. So just making this layer invisible, we're going to use our magic wand here. So let's hit W for the magic wand. And I'm going to hold Shift and just make a couple selections right out here. You can see I'm just selecting the background, and we'll do the same thing over here. So selecting the background here. Okay. So by selecting the background, I can make my layer visible again. Okay. And I'm just going to paint black right over here because when I have a selection, I can only paint inside that selection. So I'm going to paint black right over here. There we go. And it disappears from there, and it disappears from there. And then we just deselect by hitting Control or Command D. Okay? So you can see now it's contained within my horse. So there we go. Here's the before with the sky outside, and the after with the sky inside. So we can see there. Okay? And I think in this case it looks nicer with the sky contained within our horse friend. Well, there we have it. We've done pretty much everything we wanted to do, conquered some really cool things here, just basically showing you how you can use an exposure. Maybe you bring an image like this and you're like, it doesn't work because it covers the horse. Don't forget about your layer masks. As long as you create your layer masks in like a relatively natural manner, this will totally work as a double exposure. Well, there we have it, our horse double exposure. I'll see you in the next video where we do a very simple double exposure, but I love this because it's using colors and they blend together super well. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next video.